It is a fantastic day.
Stephen Fuhr is excited as he announces the government's new Defence Investment Agency, or shop elsewhere.
The goal or aim of this agency is to equip the Canadian Armed Forces with the tools and equipment they need at the speed of relevance, bringing Canadian industry into the tent to stimulate our own economy.
The Liberal government called it a fantastic day. Cameras rolled as his government launched a brand new defense investment agency. They promised speed, efficiency, and a stronger military. But Canadians remember the history too well. 20 years to acquire maritime helicopters, nearly a decade for search planes, 15 years and counting for warships, the endless F-35 saga that still hangs in limbo. Instead of inspiration, many saw déjà vu, another layer of bureaucracy, another promise of reform, another risk of backfire.
The last time Canada did defence production on a massive scale was during the Korean War. Lately, it's experimented with the national shipbuilding strategy, constructing Arctic patrol ships and now destroyers at home.
For a country that has stumbled repeatedly in defense procurement, a new agency is less a bold move and more a desperate admission of failure.
Right now, Canada buys almost all of its military gear in the U.S., but last summer signed a defense partnership with Europe, hoping to open procurement doors and Canadian business opportunities there. Some analysts worry about swapping one dependency for another.
Carney's government pitched this agency as the cure to Canada's broken system. They appointed Doug Guzman, a former banker, to bring private sector sensibility into national security. Yet here lies the gamble. Defense procurement is not banking. It is technical, complex, and tied directly to sovereignty. When nearly all Canadian military gear comes from the United States, the Prime Minister argued that Europe can provide an alternative. Last summer's defense partnership with Brussels was framed as diversification, but critics point out that Canada is only swapping dependency. From American suppliers to European ones, no real autonomy. No hard choices made about which industries must actually be built and sustained at home. It is a gamble dressed up as strategy. And if it fails, Canadians will be left weaker, not stronger. The warning signs are already flashing. Canada's last major shipbuilding programs were plagued by cost overruns and endless delays. Arctic patrol ships ballooned in price. Destroyers remain unfinished. Each time, taxpayers footed the bill, while timelines stretched years beyond schedule. Now Carney has created another agency, requiring billions in setup costs, more staff, and more bureaucracy. In a time of rising debt and deficits, this could become a black hole for public money. Opposition parties will seize on it as proof that Carney is repeating the same Trudeau-era mistakes, bold announcements with no results. For workers and families, the cost is real. More taxes, more waste, and fewer resources for housing, healthcare, or jobs. A plan meant to show strength risks exposing weakness instead. Carney's announcement was supposed to mark a turning point, but in practice, it highlights how exposed Canada has become. The Prime Minister is gambling on an untested agency with unproven leadership in a system that has failed time and again. Meanwhile, President Trump is doubling down on America First, protecting U.S. industries and pulling production home. Canada risks being left behind, neither self-reliant nor favored by Washington. The Defense Investment Agency may go down as another symbol of Canada's vulnerability. Big words, heavy spending, weak delivery. For ordinary Canadians, the stakes are personal. Each procurement failure means soldiers waiting longer for vital equipment, industries missing contracts, and taxpayers carrying heavier burdens. Instead of boosting confidence, Carney's plan deepens doubts. Families already stretched by rising prices see yet another massive bill with little to show for it. Workers in the defense sector fear that Ottawa will prioritize flashy deals abroad rather than building true capacity at home. Analysts warn that Canada is at risk of repeating the same cycle: announce, delay, overspend, and underdeliver. What was meant to be renewal now looks like another drain on the country's credibility. For Canadians, the backfire is clear: less security, more debt, and the sense that this is only the beginning of a much larger problem.
Interfor announced that from September to December, they will reduce lumber production in North America.
It's unknown what this means for each location, but union officials say we need a trade deal with the U.S. before the slowdowns become the norm.
Canada's lumber industry has just been hit with a blow that it cannot hide. Interfor, one of the largest forestry companies in North America, announced it will slash 145 million board feet of production between September and December. That is roughly 12% of its normal output. Mills from Sault Ste. Marie to Elk Lake in Ontario are already slowing down. For workers on the ground, it means reduced shifts, prolonged layoffs, and families forced to depend on unemployment insurance. This is not just a business adjustment, it is the symptom of a deeper crisis. Ottawa promised stability, but instead, Canada finds itself cornered. The country has failed to reach a trade deal with Washington, and the tariffs that were supposed to pressure the United States are breaking Canada's backbone first. The reason behind this crisis is no secret. At the end of July, the U.S. Department of Commerce finalized anti-dumping and countervailing duties on Canadian softwood lumber. Rates now climb as high as 34% for many producers. These duties went into effect in late July and mid-August, and the consequences have been immediate. Yet instead of moving swiftly to negotiate relief, Prime Minister Mark Carney chose the path of delay. Ottawa leaned on lawsuits and trade panels, waiting for WTO or USMCA rulings that could take years. The result is that Canadian producers see no reason to keep exporting at full tilt. For them, every shipment south of the border bleeds money. So the rational choice was to cut back production, idle workers, and hope for a better day. The workers of Sault Ste. Marie are paying the price. A third of them were forced onto rotating schedules, collecting employment insurance instead of steady pay. What Ottawa calls strategic patience looks in practice like chaos in local communities.
Carney's defenders insist this is a long game, but the evidence says otherwise. Canada exports the vast majority of its lumber to the United States. Without access to that market, there is no immediate alternative. Meanwhile, American builders still have domestic producers and other suppliers to draw from. The imbalance is clear. Canada bleeds jobs first. The futures market reflected the turmoil. After months of weakness, prices bounced as soon as Interfor announced its cuts. But this rebound did not rescue Canadian workers. It simply made construction costs in both countries more volatile. Ottawa had hoped to put Trump under pressure. Instead, Canada is the one cracking under strain. This is the true backfire. Ottawa's slow and cautious strategy was supposed to shield Canada, but it left the lumber sector exposed. Mills are slowing, workers are anxious, and provinces that depend on forestry are bracing for more losses. Interfor's cutback is not an isolated event. It is a warning sign of what happens when a government refuses to act decisively. Carney's failure to secure a deal with the United States has turned tariffs into a weapon against Canada itself. $1 billion of promised federal support cannot replace the lost contracts and steady paychecks. If Washington extends its duties beyond lumber to pulp, paper, or engineered wood products, the damage will escalate. What began as a tariff fight could spiral into a collapse of Canada's forestry base. Trump's tariffs may have been designed to pressure Canada, but it is Carney's hesitation, his refusal to secure real concessions, that has left Canada exposed. The backfire is undeniable. The industry is shrinking, jobs are vanishing, and Canadians are the ones left carrying the cost.
Tariffs on canola came up unexpectedly. If they can come on fast, then come off fast. And the Chinese are just going to want something in return.
There's just no real answers, and again, no real indication from our federal government as to what sort of support as producers we could be expecting in the future.
The entire system, it's time to walk away from this wrong-headed policy of the Trudeau era.
Canada thought it could look strong by slapping a 100% tariff on Chinese electric vehicles, lining itself up neatly beside Washington. But instead of gaining leverage, Canada walked straight into a trap. Beijing struck back with punishing tariffs of nearly 76% on Canadian canola, gutting a sector worth billions. Talks dragged on, yet nothing moved. It felt like déjà vu, a replay of Canada's struggle with the United States during the reciprocal tariff fight. Once again, the government promised farmers protection while offering no real solution. And once again, it is rural communities in Saskatchewan and beyond paying the price. Carney's ministers may boast about defending Canadian interests, but the truth is simple. China barely flinched, and Canada's farmers were left stranded. The government talks tough, but when the time comes to act, it has no answer. Scott Moe's mission to China was supposed to signal progress. Instead, it revealed just how cornered Ottawa has become. Chinese officials spoke politely about being willing to look ahead, but there was no commitment to remove tariffs on canola. The message was clear: Beijing will not trade canola relief for Canada's EV tariffs. What Ottawa hoped might be a quick swap has turned into a dead end. Yet Carney's government refuses to shift its position. Keeping the EV tariff intact may please Washington, but it leaves Canadian farmers bleeding. Every month of delay costs the canola industry hundreds of millions, piling up into billions of dollars in losses. Ottawa's only answer has been to roll out a temporary support package, a band-aid on a gaping wound. While officials urge patience, farm families see their markets collapsing and their livelihoods slipping away. And beneath the surface, Canada risks something even greater: the loss of credibility in international trade talks. If China senses weakness and Washington sees indecision, Canada could end up isolated, with fewer allies and even fewer options. The contrast with America is telling. When Canada faced Trump's reciprocal tariffs, it was at least shielded by the framework of USMCA. That deal gave Ottawa leverage, however limited, to hold the line. With China, there is no such safety net. The retaliation falls directly on producers, with no cushion and no backup plan. Canada finds itself trapped between two giants, unable to protect one of its most valuable agricultural exports. If Ottawa keeps the EV tariff, it risks losing its foothold in China's premium food market. If it backs down, it risks being branded weak in Washington. Either way, the damage falls on Canadians. The government claims to be playing the long game, but to most citizens it looks more like a losing game. Every choice exposes just how little room Ottawa truly has to maneuver. Today, Canada faces double pressure like never before. From the South, America demands loyalty on EV tariffs and uses trade as leverage to reshape supply chains. From the East, China punishes Canadian agriculture to force concessions. Stuck in the middle, Carney's government has delivered nothing but uncertainty. Farmers see lost contracts, households face rising costs, automakers hesitate to invest. And while all this unfolds, Ottawa dithers with flip-flops on its own EV mandate at home. The bigger picture is undeniable. Carney's government set out to project strength. Instead, it triggered retaliation abroad and paralysis at home. Canada is squeezed between two superpowers, without a clear strategy, without a plan, and without a way out. Unless leadership changes course, the backfire will only grow worse, leaving Canadians to carry the weight of a policy that never should have been pursued in the first place.
A new report from Food Banks Canada that food insecurity in this country continues to rise.
A lot of people with jobs are now having to stop at the food bank on the way home from work instead of the grocery store because that's just out of reach.
Food security in Canada is now at a breaking point, and that should alarm every household across the country. How did a G7 nation reach the stage where millions of families line up at food banks instead of grocery stores? Is it Trump's tariffs squeezing supply, or the boycott of American goods inside Canada? Or is it both, combining into one perfect storm? The evidence is stark. Food Banks Canada says more than a quarter of households, 25.5%, cannot afford enough food in 2025, compared to just 18.4% 2 years earlier. Statistics Canada reports poverty and food insecurity have surged by 40% in that same period. In its national report card, Canada received a failing grade, a D, on food security. These numbers are not statistics in a vacuum. They reflect mothers skipping meals, children arriving at school hungry, and workers ending their day at a food bank because the supermarket is out of reach. This is the reality Carney promised to prevent, but is now unfolding on his watch. At the root of this crisis lies a trade war that Canada could not escape. On August 7, 2025, President Trump imposed reciprocal tariffs of 10 to 50% on over 60 countries, including Canada. The threat of a 100% tariff on imported chips looms over the global supply chain. For Canada, the immediate pain came in food. The United States supplies roughly 57% of Canadian agricultural imports. When Trump's tariffs drove up costs across American farms and factories, those increases bled directly into Canadian shelves. Canadians who once managed to stretch a paycheck now face soaring bills for eggs, meat, and vegetables. Even those with steady jobs are not safe. Food banks report that more working families than ever are joining the lines, proof that wages cannot keep up with prices. Instead of shielding Canadians from Trump's pressure, Carney's government has left the border wide open to imported inflation. Ottawa had months to prepare, yet the policies announced were reactive, fragmented, and far too small to cushion the blow. External shocks are only half the story. Inside Canada, politics and protest have added fuel to the fire. The boycott of American goods, born from anger at Washington's tariffs, became a rallying cry. Canadians reduced cross-border shopping and turned away from U.S. brands. But this symbolic act carried a price. With fewer options, Canada leaned on alternative suppliers at higher cost, pushing grocery bills even higher. At the same time, housing remains scarce, youth unemployment is climbing, and food banks face historic demand. More than 4 million visits were recorded in the past year, compared to 600,000 before the pandemic. The boycott may have carried moral weight, yet it magnified economic pain. Families see only exhaustion, while Ottawa offers speeches instead of solutions. The government points to programs like Build Canada Homes, a $13 billion housing push, and the Canada Disability Benefit, worth $200 a month, as proof of action. But against the cost of living in Toronto or Vancouver, such measures barely make a dent. They sound bold in press releases, yet on the ground they fail to bridge the $1,000 gap between benefits and poverty lines. The truth is unavoidable. Food insecurity in Canada is no longer a fringe issue, but a national vulnerability. It is the result of twin forces: Trump's tariffs driving up external costs and domestic policies that backfired under Carney's leadership. Unless Ottawa finds a balance between trade strategy and internal support, food insecurity could harden into a structural weakness. And when a wealthy nation cannot feed its people, that weakness becomes more than an economic problem. It becomes a strategic liability that exposes Canada on the world stage.